If you're a dedicated lifter who's been hitting the gym hard, progressing your lifts, and watching those numbers climb, and you're now gearing up for a cut to reveal all that hard-earned muscle, but you're worried about losing strength and size in the process, this episode is for you. Today, I'm going to break down the truth about strength and muscle loss during a cut. We'll explore what's really happening to your body when you enter a calorie deficit and why those numbers on the bar might be dropping even if you're not losing much muscle. When you understand the science behind cutting, you can approach it with confidence, knowing how to preserve your gains while shedding fat. And the best part is that most of the strength loss you experience is temporary and easily regained once you return to maintenance calories. So if you've been hesitant to start a cut because you're afraid of losing your hard-earned progress, what I'm about to share will give you the knowledge you need to lean out effectively without sacrificing your long-term strength and muscle goals. Get ready to demystify the cutting process and learn how to get shredded while holding on to your gains. Welcome to Wits and Weights, the podcast that blends evidence and engineering to help you build smart, efficient systems to achieve your dream physique. I'm your host, Philip Pape, and today we are tackling a perennial question on the mind of every lifter who goes through a fat loss phase. What really happens to your strength and muscle during a cut? Now, this topic comes straight from one of my longtime clients and listeners, Heather C., who was also on the podcast back in episode 51, which I'll also link in the show notes. She wrote, quote, "We all talk about the possibility of losing muscle when we're on a cut, but what about losing strength simply because you are losing mass? Do we have any information on what to expect for that?" So Heather, this is a great question because she is asking specifically about strength, which you will learn about today, but strength and muscle go hand in hand. So I've decided to address both to give you the full picture. And this is one of the most common concerns I've heard from clients and listeners. And today we are going to break it down and give you the real scoop on what's happening to your body during that cut. Now, before we dive in, I've got a quick favor to ask. If you've ever gotten any value from this podcast and you haven't already, please take a moment to leave us a 5-star rating in the app you're using right now to listen to my voice. And if you're feeling generous, a brief review about what you've learned or how the show has helped you. It just takes a few seconds, but it makes a huge difference in helping us reach more people who could benefit from this information. Plus, it lets me know what content you find most valuable so I can keep delivering the goods. So go ahead, pause this episode for a moment and leave that rating and review, and I'll be here when you get back. All right, let's get into it. So let's start by breaking down Heather's question into 3 key parts. Number 1, what happens to muscle during a cut? Number 2, what happens to strength during a cut? And number 3, how much of the strength loss is due to actual muscle loss versus other factors? So first up, let's talk about muscle loss because usually this is what people are concerned about. And we do want to understand that to also understand the strength. They go hand in hand. The reality is that when you are in a calorie deficit, your body is craving. It is looking for energy sources. It's like, what are you doing to me? Go out and eat. Go out and sleep, whatever energy it can get. And it wants to hold on to the muscle because the muscle is metabolically expensive and it takes a lot of energy to maintain. But if you're not careful, your body's going to start breaking down some of that muscle tissue as fuel. So in other words, it's very interesting because once you've put on the muscle, it's not going to be lost as easy as you think, right? It's not like it just falls off. Now, if you don't train, it will definitely atrophy, but that can happen even when you're not in a diet. So I'm going to assume that if you're listening to this, you know the importance of continuing to train even when you're a cut. And once you've had put on that expensive tissue, your body, it kind of is in a new set point where it has that muscle, but it needs the energy to maintain it. So there's definitely a fine balance there when we're in a calorie deficit. The good news is that if your nutrition and training is more or less on point with a lot of leeway, muscle loss during a cut is usually pretty minimal. Even if you're going more aggressively on your cut than we've said is doable, and according to the evidence, even when you go a little more aggressive than that, you're not going to really lose much muscle unless the aggressiveness is really high or the cut is really long or some other factors. So I would say generally what I've seen with clients and what we've seen in the evidence is that at most 10%, of your muscle, maybe 5%. For most people, it's 1%. If you're going at a moderate fat loss phase, of the loss is muscle. Okay. Now that's of the amount being lost, not of your total muscle or of your body weight or anything like that. People who do not strength train, when they lose weight, they are losing a quarter to a half as muscle. And oftentimes that's in the form of a crash diet, in which case they're accelerating the muscle loss even further. I have seen typical people following a proper nutrition plan and training lose almost negligible amounts of muscle. And if they lose a little bit more than that, it's usually the total lean mass that also includes fluid. And then when they gain the weight back, the muscle, that lean mass comes right back. So very little of it's muscle, just to assure you. And if you are a newer lifter, or if you have a lot more body fat to lose, you might even gain some muscle while you cut. All right. So that's all I'm going to say about muscle today, because I actually did want to make it more about strength. But the conclusion, the long story short there is train, eat your protein, right? Don't go too extreme, and you're probably going to hold on to most of your muscle. Some of you may even gain a little bit. It is not that big of a worry if you're doing it the right way. And if you track your numbers, you can kind of see what's happening. Okay, let's talk about strength, because this is really what I wanted to focus the episode on. And this is where things get interesting, because we don't talk about this a lot. You might notice your lifts start to stall or regress, go down during a cut, even if you're not losing much muscle. So I often put it this way: you start to lose strength before you lose muscle, from just a simplistic point of view, a very reductionist point of view. And there's a few factors at play for this. The first one is neural efficiency or neuromuscular adaptation. When you're in a calorie deficit, your body is just not as efficient at recruiting muscle fibers. You don't have the energy. And this can lead to a temporary reduction in strength, whether you call it real strength or perceived strength. You are just not as efficient, even when you have the same amount of muscle mass. Okay, so just be aware of that. It's a temporary thing. The second factor is that your leverages change. Your leverage on certain lifts can change, especially in the big lifts that many of us are doing now. The powerlifting lifts, the big lifts, bench press, squat, deadlift, press. Well, the press less so. You might find that your technique may not give you the optimal output it normally does. And I was going to say your technique needs to change, needs to adjust as your body composition changes. It depends on how much it's changing. I would say this is somewhat of a natural process. You should always be working on your technique to the day you die, basically. And if things start to feel a little different, you'll know it if you're very in tune with it and you're listening to your body as you do that squat. The third factor here is the energy in general. Like when you're eating less, you just have less fuel in the tank. You have less glycogen. You're eating fewer carbs, right? And this will impact your performance in the gym. And it will especially impact it on the bigger lifts where strength is expressed. And therefore you have technically less strength, less force production. And then kind of related to this, the fourth factor is glycogen depletion, because when you're in a deficit, your body simply stores less glycogen overall in your muscle. Not only are you not able to restore it, you simply deplete a smaller amount, which also affects your strength and endurance during the workouts. Like you ever feel drained, right? You're during fat loss, you just feel a little more tired, a little more sluggish. Maybe you do get the lifts, but it's like you get wiped out more easily, which is part of the reason why we sometimes try to get creative during a fat loss phase and shift the calories a bit, shift the carbs a bit, make sure that we are really fueled up for our workouts and not trying to train fasted, those kinds of things. So basically, to answer Heather's question directly, yes, you can lose some strength simply by losing mass, even if you're not losing muscle. But most of this strength loss is temporary, and then it can be regained quickly once you return to maintenance calories or a slight surplus. Now, one last thing that actually addresses what she already acknowledged is that because you're losing mass, your absolute strength declines, right? You have less mass, less force production, less cross-sectional area, all of that. But if your lifts merely stall out or even regress just a tiny bit, if you divide that load by your weight, you might find that your relative strength has maintained or increased. Make sense? So your relative strength. If you want to know more about that, go listen to my podcast. It has the phrase scaling laws. It's one of the Wednesday podcasts I did not too long ago. I'm going to try to remember to include it in the show notes. It's about scaling laws and how relative strength is often more important than absolute strength, and why that's important during fat loss. Now, let's talk about what you can expect and how to minimize the strength loss. Okay, because as much as we can say, well, it happens, great, I'm doing all the things, so what? There are things we want to do. Okay, there's 5 things in particular I'm going to mention today. Number 1, training intensity. Maintain the training intensity. By intensity, I mean the load on the bar. Keep lifting heavy. A lot of people think during fat loss, you need to switch to high reps and high volume, right? And burn a bunch of calories. No, no, no. This is one of the almost shocking revelations I had when I started lifting, with compound lifts and for strength. I realized and I learned from the best out there that, you might want to reduce volume and sets and reps, but you want to keep the weight on the bar pretty high. It doesn't have to be 1 RMs or definitely not PRs, but it is going to be a decent percentage of your max to maintain that strength. Now, can you do a bodybuilding type program and maintain strength? Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. You can. As long as you're training hard and close to failure, right? And you are progressing. You're still, from your body's perspective, you're still recruiting significant amount of muscle mass and giving yourself the right signal. But I like to say, keep lifting heavy, because a lot of people will go way to the extreme in the other direction. Okay. Number 2, protein. Whether you're a new listener or you've listened to my last 300 episodes, it can never be said too often that you have to eat sufficient protein if you're going to be lifting weights, if you want to build muscle, if you want to maintain muscle, and just really have a great life. So we got to eat protein. And I'm going to give you the range again. It is 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of protein per pound of body weight, per pound of target body weight, but just simplify it as up to 1 gram. Now, you might have heard a lot of recent research or podcasters talk about how in reality, something as low as 0.6, 0.7 is probably enough for most people. And that's true. I like the stretch goal of 1 because a lot of people struggle to get enough in general, and it kind of pushes you well past that minimum. Plus, protein keeps you full. There's a lot of side reasons to have more protein, but it's not that you have to. Okay, get at least around 0.7 grams per pound and you're good. Hey, this is Philip, and I hope you're enjoying this episode of Wits and Weights. I started Wits and Weights to help ambitious individuals in their 30s, 40s, and beyond who want to build muscle, lose fat, and finally look like they lift. I've noticed that when people transform their physique, they not only look and feel better, but they also experience incredible changes in their health, confidence, and overall quality of life. If you're listening to this podcast, I assume you want the same thing: to build your ultimate physique and unlock your full potential, whether you're just starting out or looking to take your progress to the next level. That's why I created Wits and Weights Physique University, a semi-private group coaching experience designed to help you achieve your best physique ever. With a personalized, done-for-you nutrition plan, custom-designed courses, new workout programs each month, live coaching calls, and a supportive community, you'll have access to everything you need to succeed. If you're ready to shatter your plateaus and transform your body and life, head over to witsandweights.com/physique or click the link in the show notes to enroll today. Again, that's witsandweights.com/physique. I can't wait to welcome you to the community and help you become the strongest, leanest, and healthiest version of yourself. Now back to the show. I want to let you know about a free resource I have. They are free guides on everything from fat loss to eating out to building muscle to managing hunger to figuring out the best macros for you and more. You want to get the most out of these podcasts and your time to look and feel your best, and these free guides will give you a quick and easy way to know what to do. If you want to get your hands on these completely free guides, you can head over to witsandweights.com/free to get your free guides and level up your results today. Number 3 is you never want to cut too aggressively if muscle loss is a concern, or at least do it for too long of a period. All right. The range we talk about is 0.25 to 1% of your body weight a week. The 1% is kind of the controversial one because a bigger person with a higher metabolism who has a lot of muscle who's lifted for years can probably handle 1.25% a week for a while. But after a while, it will start to catch up with them. Somebody with a lower metabolism who maybe is an intermediate trainee not as much weight, not as much muscle. 1% is probably as much as they're going to push it before it just tanks your performance, accelerates muscle loss. It's not sustainable, all of those things. So for most people, when they're in a fat loss phase, I'm going to recommend a half to 0.75% of your body weight a week. Very simple. Push it to 1 if you want. And if you're in a special case or you're working with a coach, like if you're working with me and it makes sense to go more aggressive, which I've done many times with clients where everything is in control, everything is precise and, accounted for, and go for it, right? If it works. All right. Number 4, the fourth thing you can do here is reset your expectations. And this is based on the stuff I talked about earlier today, as well as that scaling laws episode. It is totally normal to get some reduction in your lifts when you get leaner and during fat loss. So both reasons, like being in fat loss, but also being leaner. Don't panic. It's normal. Focus on relative strength, right? Strength in relation to your body weight instead of absolute numbers. And then the last thing here is recovery, recovery, recovery. When you're in a deficit, your recovery capacity is massively reduced. And for those older folks like me, we're in the 40s, 50s, and beyond, it's reduced even further. So you've got to get enough sleep, got to manage that stress. You've got to have the right frequency of your lifting sessions where you're not just overtraining or overreaching, not doing a ton of cardio where it doesn't make sense. Pay attention to recovery and listen to your body. All right. So the last thing I want to talk about here is something that might surprise you. And that is that if you do focus on maintaining absolute strength, like PRs during a cut, this can backfire. This can be very counterproductive in multiple ways, tied into many of the things we just talked about. So let's take a hypothetical dude named Mark. All right. Mark's a big guy. He's pretty strong. He's a lifetime lifter and he's in his 50s. Okay. Actually, quite common for my clientele. The other part of my clients are women in peri-post-menopause. So 2 very common populations I work with. And he's pretty strong. He can bench press, 3 plates, 315. And he wants to stay there even during his cut. Like he doesn't want to drop his PR. He wants to keep pushing for PRs. He psychs himself up. He loads the bar. He's really good at doing the thing, training hard. And so he grinds out these really ugly reps just to hit the number. Now, if you can't tell that I'm speaking from personal experience, I am as well. Okay. And it's gotten me in trouble. And I've seen it with other lifters who send me videos. I'm like, dude, this is not what we mean by a max. I mean, it is a true max, but not what we want during fat loss. And so he's trying to get a new PR, even while losing weight and being in a deficit. And I'm talking like arm shaking, bar tilting, the whole thing. And the problem is Mark is probably losing muscle by doing this. Why is that? Because he's so focused on hitting a PR, he's neglecting his form and he's overreaching. And when you overreach like that, not only are you putting a lot of stress on your tendons, your connective tissue, especially for an older person, right? But you're doing it in a state of poor recovery, low glycogen. This is going to smash your recovery. It's going to give you a high level of fatigue that is far beyond the trade-off we want for the recovery and the growth you get out of it, because you're actually not going to get growth. You don't have the recovery capacity. You also increase your injury risk, especially for shoulders on the bench, all right, at that level, especially when you see all the shaking going on. And that is going to stall your progress because now you're going to regress probably, or you might get injured. I'm not going to say you're going to get injured, but you're going to feel it. And you might then experience muscle loss because the totality of your progress during the phase is not there like it would be if you had taken a just slightly more intelligent, moderate approach that's still training hard and pushing. And so I would recommend in this case, using an auto-regulated style of training program. Okay, now I'm speaking to all of you who love pushing PRs. I'm not speaking to those who are already doing physique type programs, which lend themselves very well to a fat loss phase by default. I'm speaking for people who are more strength focused or power building, and they're pushing for 1 rep maxes or pushing for PRs. With an auto-regulated program, you can push for your max relative to today and your capacity, but not to your all time, right? Because this relative strength is the important thing. Your absolute strength might be dropping. You're losing body mass. You're a different person with different amount of energy coming in. And you want to recalibrate to how much you can lift in relation to your new, leaner body weight and lower energy capacity. So if you can auto-regulate, if you can do a program that has rep ranges, for example, or a session-based RPE or 1RM, right? Not a all-time based or a cycle-based 1RM, just whatever you can hit today, and you don't overreach. Like the 1RM is achievable and feels like, if you guys know RPE, it feels like an 8 or 9 RPE and not a 9.5 or 10 RPE. Then your absolute strength probably is not going to decrease, not very much at all. And your relative strength might actually improve. And then when you go back to maintenance calories, you're going to quickly surpass those old numbers. I see it time and again, this bounce back where like you did a really good job being intelligent during fat loss. And then when you're done and you come back, like the numbers come back quickly and then they start to grow even further. It's pretty incredible. So the lesson here, don't let your ego dictate your training during a cut or really ever. Focus on quality reps, listen to your body, trust the process. If you're not sure what the process is, reach out to me. We can go over the process for you. And if you do that, your muscles and your joints, us older folks, come on, a lot of you are listening, I know, they're going to thank you for it. They're going to thank you for it, and you're going to maintain your strength and your muscle and your connective tissue health and your sanity. All right, as we wrap up, let's recap the key points for you guys. Number 1, muscle loss during a cut is minimized with proper nutrition, that's protein, and training, that's training hard. Whatever your program is, training hard, keep the intensity up. Number 2, strength loss during a cut is more often about the neural efficiency, the change in your leverage, the low energy availability than actual muscle loss. Number 3, most strength loss during a cut is temporary and you're going to regain it very quickly. Number 4, focus on keeping the intensity high, the weight on the bar high, prioritizing your protein that needs to be high during a fat loss phase, and then managing recovery. And then number 5, don't obsess over numbers. Look at the relative strength you have, which granted can be reduced to a number still if you'd like to go that route. But think of it in terms of form and pushing and training hard and progressing rather than ego lifting. All right. Cutting is temporary. Remember, we're not supposed to be cutting for years and years and years. You cut for a few weeks. You cut for maybe 8, 12, 16 weeks, maybe a little longer the first time you do it. And your goal is to preserve as much muscle and strength as possible. Why? So that what you lose is fat and not muscle. That's it. Let the other 95+% of people out in the world who don't have a clue what they're doing, or more correctly, they might, but they're not willing to put in the work like you are, okay? Or they haven't found this podcast, or they haven't, send them here, share them the podcast so they understand the importance of body composition and not just scale weight. We're trying to just lose fat, right? And so when you're in a cut, you're not trying to set PRs. That's not the goal, right? That's what your building phases are for. Okay, so I get passionate about this stuff. Heather and everyone else out there who are worried about losing gains during a cut, you are good. You have a smart training and nutrition approach like we discussed on this show. You can absolutely get lean while holding on to your hard-earned muscle and strength. Focus on the things that do get better. For example, you might be able to do more pull-ups because you're lighter. Just think about it. And when you transition back to maintenance or even a building phase, then you'll be primed in a fantastic way to push those numbers even higher. All right, that's it for today. If you found value in the episode, I do have one last request. Just stick around for a second. I really hope that you would take a moment to leave a rating and review for the show, even if it's just a rating. Your feedback does help others find the podcast, but I think more importantly, for your benefit, it helps me create content that serves your needs. When I see a review, hopefully a 5-star review, although lower stars will still give me feedback, but I hope it's a 5-star review. And you're specific as to how it helped you, or even the things that you wish to hear more of. I listen to that. I look at those and I come up with topics based around those. So whether it's on Apple, Spotify, wherever you're listening, take a few seconds to leave that 5-star rating and maybe a quick comment about what you've learned today. And that would mean the world to me. It would help us continue to grow this community of smart, efficient lifters. All right, until next time, keep using your wits, lifting those weights. And remember, a temporary dip in those numbers does not always mean you're losing progress. It's all part of the process and the journey to your best physique. This is Philip Pape, and you've been listening to Wits and Weights. I'll talk to you next time.